This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, we've packed a number of shows together to give you some highlights. I know you're going to enjoy the show. Thank you for being with us today. Our guest is Tony Castronovo. Thanks for being on the show, Tony.
Thank you, Whitney. Glad to be here.
Tony is a founder and managing partner of Novo Multifamily Group and Novo Investments. Tony is focused on buy and hold investing, initially in the single family space and now exclusively in multifamily apartments. He's the owner-operator and asset manager for 80 units in Bryan, College Station, Texas, a home of Texas A&M University. He's also a committed veteran of the Houston Marathon. So, Tony, thank you again for your time. I appreciate you being on the show today and being willing to share your story and helping the listeners and myself. Give us a little more about your background in real estate and let's talk a little about the single family, and moving into exclusively into multifamily, like your bio mentioned, and let's jump into your superpower.
Absolutely. I think there's probably quite a few real estate investors out there that start in the single family space. So I was one of those. And I think it probably took me about 4 months to find my first single family rental home. And it was one of those things, you watch all the shows on HGTV and you get all excited. And I purchased this house and took the whole family out there. It was demo day, and everybody was excited with their sledgehammers. And that lasted probably about 3 hits with the sledgehammer before everybody was kaput. But we were pretty hands-on, and that's, kind of a theme for me. But we did that full renovation as a family and a lot of my weekends and nights. But the interesting thing about doing it that way was I really got to learn what it was all involved regarding the contracting and the renovations. And then as I just kind of took that and kept it going and had to fill that unit with a tenant and then had to be a landlord. And what does that mean? And just being a management and IT guy for many years, I knew I had to develop processes and systems. And the turning moment for me was when I had a tenant who wanted to make sure that her payment was on time. And she showed up at 11:59 at my house and stuck a check under my doormat. And I said, that's it. We have to go online. We have to have systems, so it kind of snowballed from there. And, 1 led to 2, 2 led to 8. And eventually I moved into multifamily.
Wow. Yeah. You had a tenant show up at midnight at your house and you probably thought they didn't know where you lived.
Well, unfortunately, there is that, little clause about where to drop off your rent check, in the lease. So unfortunately, that was my home address. And I've learned since then.
I think most of us have some kind of story like that made us learn, caused us to learn some better processes, right? So why in multifamily as opposed to single family?
We had a great business in single family. If you're familiar with bigger pockets and the term BRRRR, we were doing a lot of the BRRRR strategy where we'd basically, buy a distressed home, we'd renovate it, we'd get it, listed for rent, refinance it within 90 days and pull out equity and move on and do the next one. And that was great. It was, just another log on the fire every time. We were building a good equity base, building good cash flow. But for me, I was looking to make a big step change. I just couldn't see going one property, even if it was every 3 or 4 months. It just wasn't fast enough for me. The amount of effort that you have to go through just to turn one property and then, start over, I just didn't want to do that again. So I was kind of expecting the inflection point when I got to 10 because of the financing and having to maybe move that into a portfolio loan. So I just accelerated the whole thing and said, you know what, I'm going to sell this as a package so that I can take advantage of a 1031 exchange and one transaction and then roll that all into my first multifamily. And so, I was out there looking for a multifamily that I could get into by myself because I didn't know anything about syndication at the time. And I was just looking to stretch as far as I could go. And at that point, a 20-unit multifamily was about as far as I could stretch. So we did just that. We 1031'd into that. And I guess about 2 years ago, we got into the first multifamily that was in Bryan, Texas, very close to College Station, Texas A&M. And we basically did, like I said, a hands-on approach. I didn't do all the renovations myself. I mean, what I realized by taking on that property was being from the Houston area, it's a little too far for me to, physically be there all the time. So I needed a team. I needed to have third-party property management. So even though I was doing it, I couldn't scale that way. And so it was sort of a rip the Band-Aid off and hire third-party property management. I had a Rolodex of contractors here in the Houston area from the single family days, but I had to reestablish that and really get into finding people I trusted out in this new submarket. We got started, and that property was a very clean property in the way that it was structured because every tenant was on a month-to-month lease. And so I had an opportunity to just control the rehab and this methodical plan of every couple of months, well, every month we were going to do 2 units and we were going to move the tenants out, rehab it, bring new tenants in, rinse and repeat until we get all the way through. And it started to be okay, but we realized pretty quickly that critical mass is important. Nobody wants to move in and be that first 1 or 2 tenants into a great unit, but it's a dud of a property. So we had to accelerate the whole thing. And I'll fast forward here to the story, but we basically got through renovations in about 7 months and stabilized that property
20
shortly
units in
thereafter.
7 months?
Yeah, we actually did 19. We had one tenant that simply just didn't want to go, and we couldn't necessarily get him out. He was a great tenant, and he wanted to pay more. I mean, he didn't want to pay more, but he was willing to pay more, and we didn't have to renovate it. So, we just kept him in there, and he's been there now for several years. So we got one more looming.
Nice. So I know, just from previous conversation, you'd like to have a hands-on approach, and I'd like for you to elaborate on that a little bit. And, you had mentioned earlier too, just like, how people say working on your business versus working in your business, and I'd love to know how that applies to your thought process of this hands-on approach.
Yeah, so you kind of hinted on the saying there, right? A lot of people will say you have to work on your business, not in your business. For me, it's always worked that if I'm in my business, it's like working under the hood of your car. You get to know everything about it. You know how to optimize it, what makes it tick. And so to me, it's kind of like if you've ever seen the show Undercover Boss. If you're sitting, in the ivory tower, you may not really understand what's going on the ground in your business. And I don't necessarily mean to be an undercover boss, although I think a lot of my tenants think I'm the maintenance guy. But beyond that, I mean, I love being there in it, seeing what's going on, seeing the difficulties that our contractors are having, let's say with the renovations or maybe with our property management and what they're dealing with on the ground, because these are things that, I'm a process guy. I can fix things if I know what the problems are, and I can't really know what the problems are unless I see them firsthand.
How does that work, say, with employees, or do you have employees that are helping you, working for you, and how do you see that scaling?
So we're not at a point where we have employees at this point. Everything that I've done, I'll say, are partners, not even vendors, because I do treat everybody that way. We're all in this together. I think that's one of the nice things about multifamily is I know I've heard this a million times. It's a team sport, right? I try to be transparent with everybody. And so even like the general contractor that I work with, he actually wanted to be one of my investors. My attorney, encouraged me not to do that through just conflict of interest. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is that, there was this mutual trust there that he understood my business model and what I was after. And I understood what he needs to be successful as well. And, we've all been there where we're trying to nickel and dime a contractor and trying to squeeze out every last dollar. And, I'm guilty of it just like anybody else. But for me, it's making sure he understands why I'm pushing in certain places to make the business successful. Because at the end of the day, if it's not, then he doesn't have a job either. So he's now been with us on a couple of different properties. and kind of been more of a long haul. And that's just one example. Our property management team is the same way.
How do you see that, the hands-on approach? How do you see that scaling? You buy another, larger multifamily property, things like that. It's going to be hard for Tony to be that maintenance man, right? But so how do you see that working long term?
Yeah, I think it's that stabilization factor. So my other property, the 20 unit that I mentioned, and the one actually that I'm referring to now is I have a 60 unit as well. And that one we picked up the end of last year. And that one is still going through a stabilization. So we're heavy into the renovations and really trying to improve the tenant base and so forth. And so I'm very hands-on. And the funny thing is, I sometimes feel a little guilty because I'm 2 miles away from my 20 unit property. And many times when I'm in town, I don't even go there. And it feels like, I'm deserting a child, but it doesn't require my attention. It's stable now. It's running, it's optimized. I mean, there's always something I can do to make it better, but I have a team in place and I really don't need to worry about it very much.
Our guest is Travis Smith. Thanks for being on the show, Travis.
Super glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Travis started his career with Morgan Stanley, but realized the most direct path to true wealth and financial freedom is in the private markets. He is now a partner in several investor groups he calls tribes that invests in single-family rentals, multifamily, and commercial real estate. However, his favorite investor group is the one that enabled him to own vacation homes and even a racehorse with his brothers. That's so interesting. Now his obsession is to level the playing field, and he knows firsthand that forming investor groups is the great equalizer. As a result, he built TribeVest, an online platform where people can assemble their tribe, align, form, and operate their own investor group. So Travis, thanks again for being on the show. I'm looking forward to hearing more about TribeVest, just exactly what that does, how that enables investors. I know there's investors listening right now that's, it's perked their ears. They're wondering how that's helpful to them. And just diving into that, I would love to hear a little more about this racehorse story just a little bit as well. But tell us a little more about who you are and how you got into this type of business.
Absolutely. I am and was a lot like, I'm sure, a lot of your listeners. I kind of was doing all the things that I was supposed to do, going to school, getting good grades, getting a good job, making a decent income, but, realized that there had to be a better way of building wealth, and always saw real estate as a way to hack wealth without having to give up my day job. But the problem was one, we never grew up learning how to invest in real estate. And two, of course, the biggest barrier for any private investment, especially real estate, is capital. So anyway, on a fishing trip about 10 years ago, a little more than that now, my brothers and I were talking about this. And we kept talking about getting in on this deal and that deal. And we kind of stopped ourselves and said, guys, we just don't have the lump sums of money we need to get in here. So what are we going to do about it? And our breakthrough was that we each agreed to a manageable monthly contribution of $500 each a month. So that was $2,000 between the four of us, $24,000 a year. And within that first year, we had closed our first deal. And as real estate does, one turned into two, turned into three, and then again and again. And then we look back at our multi-million-dollar portfolio, and we realized that by forming and funding that investor tribe, we secured a future we could have never dreamed of. And eventually led to all sorts of investments, not just real estate, but we got into single-family, multifamily, a bunch of syndications, and even a racehorse at some point.
Wow. So you all recognize that you need to be investing, right? But you didn't have the capital by yourself. But by pulling it together, you could invest it and start growing your capital faster or earlier on than maybe if you'd just waited till you saved it up yourself. Is that right?
That's right. It was more than just capital that was the barrier for us. That's always the most obvious one. But the truth is we didn't have any experience. We didn't have a network of people to help us, find the right deals and navigate those deals. We didn't have the guts on our own. And, so tribe, by pulling together as a tribe, of course, we pulled our capital together. And then we also learned and had the confidence to move forward together too. But that's really the power of the tribe is all encompassing. And ultimately, you end up investing in things you wouldn't or couldn't on your own. And that's where we were. We wanted to invest in something we wouldn't or couldn't on our own. And now the tribe serves a little bit of a different purpose. It gives us the ability to invest in more faster.
Wow. Well, why don't we dive into that a little bit and just the why that tribe is so beneficial and how those things work and why it's beneficial to be a part of that and how that helps us.
For sure. I think anybody that was in the position I was in, and I think we've all been there, right? We've all been in that position where there's that barrier of entry. And by forming a tribe, and I want to just take a quick step back here and say, listen, we didn't invent tribe investing. Arguably, we've been tribe investing since the beginning of time, thriving and, surviving together. But what we did do is made it 10 times easier and a tenth the cost to do it. And so by doing that, we really, introduced this concept to people that probably didn't consider it. But now that technology exists out there, really anybody can come together and pool their capital and ultimately put themselves in a position to invest in things, again, that they just normally wouldn't have done.
Nice. So, what are some ways that you've seen investors, maybe invest quicker or maybe with less risk by being part of a tribe?
Yeah, you nailed it. So there are tribes. Now we have thousands of them on our platform, are invested in all sorts of things. Real estate, of course, is kind of the biggest reason or always the biggest goal for all of our tribes, or most of our tribes, I should say. About 85% are invested in real estate. And that goes to anybody that's like investing in a single family down the road, or someone's trying to do a multi-unit for the first time and coming together with their tribe to do that. And then we also see people participating in syndicates. And you think about how most of the time you get into a syndicate, it's $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 minimum to get in. And if you're new to real estate investing, and this is people with a lot of money in a lot of cases too, even though they have the capital, they're not familiar with this. This is new territory for them. And so they're way less likely to put $50,000 down or $100,000 down of their individual money on a solo investment. It just doesn't feel right. And so what forming a tribe does for people like that is you can go out and bring in another 3 people. So instead of $50,000, everybody's in for $12,000. And instead of $100,000, everybody's in for $25,000. And you kind of get this confidence that you wouldn't have on your own. And that comes because you really spread the risk, right? You weren't all in on it, but you were still participating in a very exciting deal. So spreading that risk is so important, and just getting that confidence. I think that was the thing. Like, I look back at my brothers and I, we didn't have the guts. Like, we didn't have the experience, and we didn't have podcasts like this one to kind of get educated on. So it really was, we were willing to go out there and kind of do immersive learning, but we wouldn't have done that on our own, but together we would.
How do we go about forming a tribe like this? And I think about, okay, who should be in my tribe, and how do I, should that just be anyone, or just thinking about the legalities, behind that, and how picky is this? Is this a partnership, or is it just, kind of like a mastermind, that's investing together? How would you think through that?
Great question. So to answer your question, it is a partnership. So most of our tribes, in the end, so I'll kind of start with the end here, they're forming an LLC, they're filing their LLC, and you can do that on our platform in any of the 50 states. We automate that all online, where you get your articles of organization, You get a number of templates for your operating agreement. We kind of help you think through those things. But yeah, you're filing an LLC, and everybody that's in the tribe is an owner. They're a business owner. They own that LLC and therefore a member of the board. And when major decisions come up per the operating agreement, but in most cases, there's a vote to be had by, the members of that tribe. So to answer your question, they are partners, and that's an important thing. This is a pretty sophisticated audience here, and tribe investing is super simple in that it's an LLC, and everybody that's in that LLC is not just an investor but an owner, and that's important because that they're considered an active partner. So they're not passive. So that's an important thing. But then what it does do is it gives that entity, that LLC, to go and be a passive investor in a syndicate, for example. But the members of the LLC are active and business owners of that LLC. They make a decision to go participate in a syndicate, let's say, where that LLC, that entity, is a passive investor in that arrangement. So anyway, that's kind of the end in mind. And by the way, you form your LLC, you get your EIN. We help you open up a business bank account all online. So now you're operating and have a business bank account, and you can actually link your external business accounts to do easy capital calls, right? Even on a monthly manageable way. And so that's a little bit of the solution. Now, you mentioned who and how, and that's a real important question. We start with people like and trust. It's funny, almost as long as we've been told stranger equals danger, we've been told, don't invest with friends and family. But when you've been around long enough to know that, and successful enough that most successful business owners, most successful owners will tell you the opposite. They'll say, do business with people like, and trust. And so that's where TribeVest really comes in. We help you eliminate some of that uncomfortableness that comes with starting a business with a friend or a family. And we do that due diligence, so making sure that each partner is vetted and that they can be in a position to participate in such a venture. All that stuff falls on TribeVest, and then the tribe can just focus on the fun and finding the right deal and getting business done. But the answer is find people like, and trust, and that have the same worldview and similar worldviews and aspirations that you do. And by the way, are in a similar position financially. That's also a really important qualifier.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.